So we talked about two classes in our BlackJack game. We talked a little bit about the GUI. Today we're going to talk about the other classes and maybe talk about the GUI a little bit more. Now there's some options for these. Obviously, there's not one right way to do anything, but we can sort of come up with some criteria of what would make for a better design or not so good a design. And when you're working on a project, on occasion there's compromises that you'll make. You know, there may be, for one reason or another, you may take a shortcut on a project due to time constraints or whatever. And a lot of times those things come back to bite you, but you got to do what you got to do. All right, so we talked about the cards class, and we talked about the deck class. And really, each of those classes really just has a handful of methods, pardon the pun. All right? Do we have any questions about those classes? The card class or the deck class? No questions? Okay. Well then, what other classes do we need? Let's think this through. And let's think of what some of the functions are on those classes. Keeping in mind that we could put some of these things in different places. All right? We have our GUI, which will probably have two recycler views and some buttons on it, and maybe some labels to indicate if you won last game, if you lost last game, maybe if you're doing something, if you're accumulating totals, you know, are you ahead or are you behind or whatever. And you could make it, you could build it from there. You could have a betting option or whatever. We're not going to worry about that for now. So we said we'd have a card class and a deck class. We're going to need somewhere to put each player's cards, the player and the dealer. Where do you suggest we put those? We're going to display them in this recycler view. Okay? So we're going to display them there. But where are we going to put them? Where could we put them?
What do you mean?
Well, I deal you a king and an 8. All right?
I'm going to be putting them in the recycler.
You're going to show them in the recycler view.
Right.
But remember that associated with the recycler view, there's going to be an adapter. Right? And the adapter, typically, one of the things that you give adapter is, in the examples we gave so far, we've given it an array list. Okay? So, what's that array list going to be comprised of?
Card images.
Card images? Pardon me?
That's what I was saying, yes.
Okay. I would say instead of the images, so instead of having a number of images, we're going to display cards.
Okay.
We're going to rather keep array lists of cards.
Okay.
Now, why cards instead of card images? Why did you say cards instead of card images?
I guess you can
you can do more if you store the cards. All right. What do I mean you can do more? Well, you can change it to not show the image of a card, but to show a text explanation of the card. So if you wanted to have your game not show that, but show Ace of Hearts, Three of Spades, whatever, you could change it easily to do that. Okay? In addition, somewhere down the line, you're going to have to give a list of cards to something to score the hand. Correct? If I give a list of images to the scoring function, we haven't talked about where the scoring function is going to live, but let's say there's a function that says score this hand. Okay? If we give that a list of images, the scoring a hand's going to have to try to figure out from the image what the card is, right? What the face value of the card is and so on. Whereas if you have a card, if you give it a list of cards, well, you just ask the card, what's your face value? Compare that up against the list of face values and the points that are associated with the face values and so on. And then you can come up with a score for the cards. So I'm going to put over on the far side of the board, I'm going to put over stuff that we know we have to have, but we're not sure where we're going to put it. All right? And then we can figure out some places where we're going to put it. Right? So, one thing that we could have is we could have or that we're going to need 2 array lists of cards. One for the player and one for the dealer. All right. We're also going to need a function to score the hand. What is that function going to take as an argument? Yeah. An array list of cards, an array list of cards. So it's going to accept as an argument an array list of cards. And what's it going to return? What's the return value going to be? Integer. Sounds good. We might have a function that says, did the player win this game? All right? Did the player win this game? What would that function take as arguments? In other words, if I asked you, hey, just played a game of BlackJack, did I win? What would you need to know? You need to know the score. All right. What else could you know?
A Boolean is winner.
Well, Boolean for if I won. That's the return value. What would I give that function now?
The number of points.
You could give the score the number of points, right? But that would mean, it's a little bit tricky, so yeah, it's going to need to score. But what I'm going to say is we're going to give it the hands. All right? We're going to give it the 2 array lists of hands. So I'm going to give it 2 arguments. function, did player win? It's going to return a Boolean. It's going to accept two arguments. An array list of cards for the player, an array list of cards for the dealer. What's the code for this function going to look like? What's it going to do? Exactly. It's going to call score hand for the first hand. It's going to call score hand for the second hand. So it has two values. It will look to see if one of them's over 21. Because if one of them's over 21, then that person lost. It will then look to see which one is higher without going over 21. And if it's the player's hand, they're the winner. If it's not the player's hand, then they didn't win. And a tie, I think the dealer wins. That's the rule we're going to play by anyhow. Pardon me?
That's house rules.
Okay, yeah. So the tie, the dealer wins. So we have these two functions that belong somewhere. All right? We definitely know we have to do this. We definitely have to be able to look at the two hands of cards and determine who won. And the process of determining who won is going to involve scoring the hand, scoring each of the respective hands. So we have these two functions that could go somewhere. All right? Now, the other thing that we have, if we're writing the classes here, we have our activity. Sort of handles the user interface, the button pressing, and all that kind of stuff. The initializing the game, the button pressing. It's the boss. It's running the show. All right? We're going to have our recycler views. One for the player and one for the dealer. Will we create two separate classes for these recycler views? A player recycler view and a dealer recycler view? Or are we going to just create a single recycler view and then use it two times? Anyone disagree with that? You can do it either way, right? But my thought is, when I look at this and when I think about this, all right, the way these two recycler views behave are the same. They get cards, and they get cards added to them. Really not much of a difference. So I would have my hand recycler view. And there'll be two instances of it. Just like there's two array lists of cards. All right? Now, where are we going to put? We have to decide where we're putting these things. What about these two functions? Let's start with these two. Where are we going to put them? Where are our choices?
The score hand, we don't have a rule book class. And
Okay.
we put the scoring of the hand and whether or not they won or not into the rule book.
I would agree with that. So, we're going to make a rule book class that is going to contain the score hand method and did player win method. think that's the correct answer. Why did you answer that? Why did you answer it that way?
Okay, well, I've already done the layout.
Okay.
That's where I put it. But
Okay.
I put it there. I did most of the work in the rule book.
Okay.
For determining, for the scoring, for dealing the cards, for the basic game of itself was done in the rule book, because you've got to know if it's a dealer or not a dealer when you go to value for some of it. I'm getting myself confused.
No,
anyway.
no, I think you're explaining it right.
Okay. If I come down here to rule book. Yeah, because in the rule book I actually start the game and I do an initial reset. I deal the cards, I evaluate the card for the player, and then I set a variable is dealer, and I deal the card and evaluate the cards again, basically the score hand.
Okay.
But it's done for scoring the points. In the case of being a dealer, before I deal the cards, I need to know what the dealer rules are and if they're going to get another card.
Okay. Let's back up for a second.
Okay.
Let's just answer the question, the immediate question, which is, why did you put it in a rule book class instead of somewhere else?
Because it is not part of the card, it's not part of the deck, it's part of the rules of the game.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. I wouldn't put it in a card because that's not characteristics of the card, right? Cards can be used in all kinds of games, all right? Cards can be used in poker, where the meaning of cards are totally different in poker, all right? Suits really don't matter in blackjack, right? Where suits matter in poker or rummy or other card games. So it's not really functionality related to the individual card. It's not really functionality related to the deck, because again, a deck can be used in many different games, all right? So therefore, it's its own entity. It's its own logic. The game rules itself has a logic. Now, there's another alternative that isn't horrible, all right? But I'm going to bring up this other option, and then I want you to argue why the rulebook class, not necessarily you, but the class collectively, to argue why the rulebook class is a better idea than the other option I'm going to say. I could put those two functions in the activity. I could, all right? It's not horrible. Not going to get arrested for doing that. Probably not. All right. But why is it better to put them in a rulebook class?
Because it's specific to this game.
Because it's specific to this game. All right. Anyone want to expand on that? Possibly reusability. I could take my set of classes and put them with a different interface if I wanted to. All right.
Another reason is that you have told us in the past that it's good to keep your main activity more simple and unclutter it where possible into other.
That is true as well. And again, this goes by why I said that. Absolutely. You want each class to have a clearly defined purpose. All right? And the activity is sort of the coordinator of the user interface. That's its job. All right? In other words, it has the code if you press a button to go and do something. But it's not necessarily the one that does it. It tells someone else, and by someone else, I mean some other class or object, to go and do something. All right? A good way to tell if something has a single purpose or not is to describe what it does. And if you use the word and, then it doesn't have a single purpose, right? You could say that for functions. You can say that for classes. So if my activity class, if its purpose is to control the user interface and contain the rules of BlackJack, the warning light should go off, right? Because I use the word and. That means it's not single purpose. This gets back to a principle that we do in all kinds of coding that we do, whether you're talking about web development, ASP.NET stuff, whether you're talking about conventional Java stuff, desktop C# development, is a separation into layers within an application. Even in a simple form, that's what you get with websites, where you have your CSS separate from your HTML, separate from your JavaScript. The cleaner that you can keep things separated to each component, it just does one thing, just does one job, then the more reusable the code's going to be, the better designed the code's going to be, the more flexible, easier to test, less prone to errors. Tons of good things come from that. So, a rules class is a good idea because probably the only other place to put it would be the activity. Maybe you could put it in a recycler view, but that's probably a worse idea than the activity. All right, that's really kind of muddying the water. So, your two choices here are to create a class that does just that, or incorporate it into the activity, and, well, for all the reasons that we just gave, it's better to create its own class. So we decided where those two functions go. Where are those two array lists going to go? With the array list, yeah, the two array lists, where are they going to go? All right, you answered in the adapter. You're right. That's one place where the cards are going to go, is in the adapter. Okay, because remember, you need that. So you're going to have, in this recycler view, you're going to have an array list of cards. All right, I should write it out. But if you remember the Twitter example, remember my example, remember the pizza example that you're working on. Typically, that array list gets created somewhere else, the main activity maybe, and gets passed in the recycler view. So, we could put these array lists in the main activity. That's one option. What's our other option? Yeah. Make a player class. And put these in there. What's the better option? Well, we probably had that argument 2 minutes ago, right? Instead of throwing stuff in the activity that really doesn't belong there, it's better to make its own class. Now, that being said, remember, we can pass stuff around. You know, the array list might live in the player class, but we could have functions that the activity could call on the player to get the array list so that we could pass it over here, right? So if we say that there are array lists in here, there could just be a getArrayList method over here that we could call to get it. Or if there's players that live in the rule book, which is a possibility, one way to do it, you can have the rule book return a player's array list. Give me player hand, give me dealer hand. So there's ways of getting that array list passed around regardless of where it lives. All right? So the activity has to have access to it because the activity is going to create the recycler view. But that doesn't mean it needs to be in the activity. It could be in the player class. Now, In the player class, the nice thing about the player class is if we were going to expand this and like keep track of other information about the player, the name, what their winnings were, stuff like that, would have a place to put that stuff. All right. What about the rule that says that a dealer has to take a hit at 17 or lower than 17 and has to stay at 17 and above? Where does that code go? In the rules. Yeah. You could put it in the player class. You could actually make a subclass of player called dealer and put that in there. Or it could be in here. I don't see, I could make the argument either way. All right, so that one is up in the air. Now, can anyone think of any functionality for just our very basic, play a single hand of blackjack and say if you've won or lost? That's all we're doing at this point. We're not betting. We're not splitting. We're not buying insurance. We're not doing any of that crazy stuff. Can anyone think of any functionality in one hand of blackjack that we haven't discussed the code and where we probably want to put it? I don't think we have, but again, I might be missing something. Okay, again, we're not going to worry about bets for now. If we were, that probably would be in the player class to keep track of that, and the interface would have something to ask how much they were betting. The rule book would probably get into it because the rule book would determine how much you pay. You won based on it. So not going to worry about bets for now. Just a single hand, win or lose. Any other functionality that we are missing? Well, okay. Well, what I would think would happen is that somewhere in your activity, after the player has held or busted, and the dealer is held or busted, we're going to ask who won, and we're going to get the response back from the rules. And then we can display that in the label. So the activity is controlling those calls to the game itself. Because remember, the dealer is in charge of the not the dealer. The activity is in charge of the user interface. What's our recycler view going to look like? All right. What methods exist in a recycler view?
We're going to have the constructor.
We're going to have a constructor.
Array list of cards.
And we're going to somehow pass in an array list of cards. Okay? Where that array list lives, again, could be in the activity if you wanted to, could be in its own player class. But somehow we're going to get the two array lists for the two players. The activity is going to get those, and it's going to call a constructor on the recycler view and give them those array lists. Okay? So we have a constructor. What else do we have? Let's go and look. Let's look at what methods are available in a recycler view.
I've already written it down, but
Oh no, let's hear them.
We're going to. There's three things to any adapter that you're going to have.
Okay.
You're going to have the get item count method, which is what's called first based upon the array list. You're going to have an on create view holder and an on bind view holder. And then you're going to, and I'm not quite sure how to represent that in the UML. I couldn't find it's recycler view.
And then you're going to have an inner class of view holder. what as a method? Constructor? Is that it?
I don't know.
I think it just has a constructor. So, constructor is going to accept what? It's going to accept the array list is the argument. All right. Get item count. What's that line of code going to look like? What's it going to return?
The size of the array.
Size of the array list. All right. So that one's easy. Create Viewholder. What's that going to do?
That's going to inflate the layout and return the Viewholder view.
Okay. It's going to inflate the layout, the item layout, and return the Viewholder view. So, what do we mean by inflating again? Well, remember, this is our main XML, so activity main XML or whatever. We are going to have a second XML that consists of what one item in the recycler view looks like. So what's one item in that recycler view look like?
How we defined it in the item list. With
Right, but in this case, what's it going to be? Is it going to be a text field? 2 text fields?
it's going to be an image.
It's going to be an image view. So, why? Because every time we add something to that recycler view, we pop up an image view. All right? So our item view is going to contain an image view. Our item XML is going to contain an image view. For every view holder that we're creating in our recycler view, we're going to inflate this layout. That is, we're going to create an image view. We're going to call this constructor, we create the image view, and we point to the image view by saying get element for ID or whatever that function is. Get view by ID. I'm confusing JavaScript and Android here. Get view for ID or something like that. So we're going to get a pointer to it. We're going to set that pointer. So that bind view holder can do what? This creates that image. This points to the different things on the image. This is actually going to set the image's source. All right? So we go and we create an image view, but we don't say what image actually gets put inside it until this function gets called. Now, what's going to be in this function? How are we going to find out the name of, or the image file name that we want to put in here?
By the ID of the card or whatever you're trying to display.
By the image name.
Okay, you're right. We're going to look at the card that we're trying to display, but we're probably going to have a method, and we talked about this when we defined the card class. There's probably going to be a method that says get image name. All right, and there we have the pointer to the image over here. We set the image that's going to appear in that image view to be the file that that card is for. All right, so we get the image name from the card, we get the pointer from here, and we simply set that. How do you do that? I don't know, but I know that you do that here, right? So it's just a matter of looking up a syntax. If I know a file name, how do I make an image view use that file name? Should be able to Google that and have an answer fairly quickly.
Are you talking about the find view by ID?
Well, the find view by ID is going to be here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create an image view in this view holder called card image. We're going to find view by ID to find whatever ID we have, and we're going to set that equal to card view. And then here, we're going to call some code on card view to set the image to that array's element, that Arraylist's element, and calling the get card image, get card file name, or whatever we call that method. All right, so here's an overview of, in general, what you need to do. I won't say literally all the functionality you need to do, but most of the stuff that I can think of, and good places to put it. All right? So you need to document this. You need to finalize this, and you can use a class diagram, or you can write out class and blah, blah, blah. For your recycler view, by the way, to show the view holder, I would just write an inner class view holder and not go into any detail because that class isn't particularly exciting. Yeah, there's not a lot going on in it. All right? So that's your assignment for Thursday, or Wednesday, I believe. All right? It's just essentially formalize what we have talked about the last couple of classes. Now, next week's assignment is simply to make one of these recycler views and just be able to deal cards into them. Just be able to hit the deal button and just accumulate a bunch of cards in the recycler view. Don't have to do any playing of the logic or anything like that. Just deal, display the card, image in the recycler view. What I plan on doing is giving you the next couple of classes at least. So probably 2 classes. It'll be this Thursday and next Tuesday just to work on this stuff. Now if you have other stuff that you need to get out of the way first, try to take care of that as quickly as possible. All right? Like any old assignments that need graded. So make sure you see me. Remember, we're still doing the bit where I'm not grading anything unless I see you in lab. So come to lab, let me grade your stuff, get caught up so that you can start working on this as soon as possible. Are there any questions about this? Yes?
So should we be in lab next week?
Next class, yeah, Thursday just go to lab.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably walk down here just in case you forgot, because chances are I'll probably forget and wonder why there's no one in class and I'll remember we're meeting in lab. So, yeah, don't panic if you forget and come here. But yeah, we'll meet just in lab. Thursday and probably in next Tuesday. All right, questions? Okay, I'm going to go unlock the door for lab so you guys can get in and start working. And then I'm going to come back and get my files, and then I will be back in lab.